The moment the words left my mouth, 12 spears turned toward my chest. I did not plan to say it. I did not even think before I said it. 1 second I was standing in the back row of the human delegation, holding a data tablet I was told never to speak near, and the next second I heard my own voice fill the silence of the throne chamber. Your eyes are stunning, like the aurora back home. The room went cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. My name is Ethan Marsh. Before that day, nobody outside my own department knew my name. I was 26 years old, the lowest-ranking member of the first human delegation ever allowed inside the Vorthali royal court, and my only job was to stay quiet, stay in the back, and carry equipment for people who actually mattered. I was not supposed to speak. I was not supposed to look directly at the Queen. I was told this 3 times before we even boarded the shuttle that brought us down to the surface. I broke both rules within the first 10 minutes. The Vorthali throne room was unlike anything I had ever stood inside. The ceiling rose so high that the light fixtures near the top looked like distant stars. The walls pulsed faintly with a soft blue glow, some kind of living material that reacted to sound and movement. Rows of guards stood along both sides of the chamber, tall insect-boned figures wrapped in dark ceremonial plating, each one holding a long curved weapon that looked like it could cut through solid metal without slowing down. And at the far end of the room, seated on a throne carved from black stone, was Queen Ashinar. I had seen images of her before the mission. Everyone had. She was the face of an empire that stretched across 6 star systems, a ruler who had held her throne for 300 years, a name spoken with fear in every human briefing I had ever attended. The images did not prepare me for the real thing. She was massive, easily twice the height of the tallest human in our delegation, with a body plated in dark violet chitin that shimmered faintly under the chamber lights. Her face was narrow and sharp, built from angles that looked almost architectural, nothing soft about it at all. And her eyes. Her eyes were the one part of her that did not look like a weapon. They were pale silver, streaked through with threads of shifting color, blue fading into green, fading into a soft gold, the way the night sky back home would ripple with light during the winter months when the aurora came out over the northern hills where I grew up. I used to sit outside with my sister and watch that sky for hours. I had not thought about that memory in years. I thought about it the second I looked into the Queen's eyes. The delegation lead, a sharp woman named Laura Whitfield, had spent the last hour walking us through protocol. No eye contact unless addressed directly, no personal remarks, no questions about her age, her health, or her physical appearance. Speak only when spoken to, and even then, keep your words short and formal. I had nodded along with everyone else. I meant to follow every single rule. Then the translator device on my wrist picked up something the Queen said to one of her advisors, a low remark about the strange new visitors and their strange soft faces, and for half a second she turned her head and looked straight at me, not at Laura, not at the ambassador standing beside her. At me, standing in the back row holding a tablet nobody needed, and I forgot every single rule I had just been given. Your eyes are stunning, like the aurora back home. The words came out simple and plain, the kind of thing you might say to a stranger on the street without thinking twice about it. On my planet, it would have earned a smile, maybe a quiet thank you, nothing more. Here, in this chamber, it landed like a detonation. The 12 guards along the walls moved as one unit. Weapons rose. Boots struck stone in perfect unison as they stepped forward, closing the distance toward me faster than I thought something that large could move. Laura grabbed my arm and pulled me back, her face white with panic, hissing something at me that I could not hear over the sudden roaring of blood in my own ears. But it was not the guards that stopped my heart. It was the Queen. She had gone completely still. Not the practiced stillness of royalty, not the composed silence I had read about in briefing after briefing. This was different. Her long fingers, resting on the arm of her throne, had curled inward, gripping the black stone hard enough that I heard it crack, a small, thin fracture line spreading beneath her hand. Her breathing, visible in the way her chest plates shifted, had gone shallow and quick. And her eyes, those same eyes I had just complimented, were shining with something wet and bright that had no business being there. An alien queen who ruled 6 star systems, who had outlived every human born in the last 3 centuries, who commanded thousands of soldiers with a single word, looked like she was about to cry in front of her entire guard. Nobody in that room understood why, except her. The advisor standing closest to the throne, a thin gray-robed figure with sunken eyes, stepped forward and said something sharp and fast in the Vorthali tongue, too quick for my translator to catch cleanly. Whatever he said made 2 of the guards hesitate mid-stride, their weapons wavering for just a moment before snapping back up again. Laura was still gripping my arm, and I could feel her shaking, though I was not sure if it was fear for herself or fear for me. Behind us, the rest of the delegation had frozen in place, none of them daring to move, none of them understanding what I had just done any better than I did. I raised my hands slowly, the way you might if you were surrounded by dogs you had never met and did not know if they bit. My tablet clattered to the floor. Nobody moved to pick it up. "Your Majesty," Laura said, her voice cracking despite her training, "please forgive the boy. He is new. He does not understand our customs. He meant no offense." The queen did not answer right away. She sat there with her hand still pressed hard against the cracked stone, her chest rising and falling in short, controlled breaths, staring at me across the length of that enormous chamber like I was the only other person in the world. Then she raised one hand, palm outward toward her guards. "Stand down." Her voice, translated a half-second later through my earpiece, was low and rough, nothing like the smooth, formal tone the recordings back home had led me to expect. The guards did not move at first, clearly caught between obedience and confusion. She repeated the order, sharper this time, and one by one they lowered their weapons, though none of them looked away from me. Not one. The advisor beside the throne leaned in and whispered something urgent, and I caught a single word through the translator that made my stomach drop. Omen. I did not know what that word meant in this context. I did not know if I had just complimented the queen or somehow threatened her life without saying a single violent word. I only knew that everyone around me, from the lowest guard to the sharpest advisor, was looking at me now with an expression that mixed fear and something else, something closer to disbelief. Laura pulled me back another step, murmuring for me to stay silent, stay still, let her handle this. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak even if I had wanted to. My legs had gone weak beneath me, adrenaline draining out and leaving something colder in its place. The queen rose from her throne. She did it slowly, deliberately, every movement measured and controlled despite whatever storm was clearly running through her underneath. Her guards straightened instantly, forming a loose corridor as she stepped down from the raised platform where her throne sat, her long legs carrying her across the chamber floor with a grace that did not match her size at all. She stopped several feet from where I stood, close enough now that I could see the fine detail in her violet plating, close enough to see that the shine in her eyes had not gone away. If anything, it had grown, a thin, bright line gathering along the lower edge of one eye before she blinked it back with visible effort. "Say it again," she said. Laura's hand tightened on my arm in warning. I ignored it. "Your eyes," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "They remind me of something beautiful from my home." "That is all I meant. I did not know it would upset you. I am sorry if it did." The queen studied me for a long moment, her head tilted slightly, the way a person might look at a puzzle they had never expected to see solved. Behind her, the advisor made a soft, strangled sound, quickly covered by a cough. None of the guards spoke. None of them moved. "Nobody has ever said such a thing to me," she said finally, "not while I still draw breath." I did not understand what that meant. Not fully, not yet. But I understood enough to know that whatever line I had crossed without meaning to, it was not the kind of line anyone in this room had ever seen crossed before, and it was not the kind of line that could be uncrossed with a simple apology. The queen turned to Laura, her voice shifting back into something colder and more formal, though I noticed her hands were still trembling faintly at her sides. "The young one will remain," she said. "The rest of your delegation may return to your quarters. I wish to speak with him alone." Laura's grip on my arm went painfully tight. "Your Majesty," she began, "protocol requires that any private audience include at minimum one senior member of our delegation, for the safety and proper conduct of—" "I will guarantee his safety," the Queen said, cutting her off without raising her voice at all, the words carrying a weight that made even Laura fall silent. "You have my word as Queen of the Vorthali. He is not in danger from me. From anyone else in this room, I could not say the same," she added quietly, glancing toward her own guards with an expression I could not read. Laura looked at me, searching my face for some sign of what to do, and I realized with a jolt that she was actually asking me, silently, whether I wanted this. I thought about the spears that had nearly reached me minutes ago. I thought about the way the Queen's eyes had shone before she blinked the wetness away. I thought about the word the advisor had whispered, "Omen." I nodded. Laura's jaw tightened, but she stepped back, gathering the rest of the delegation with sharp gestures, herding them toward the tall doors at the far end of the chamber. Each of them threw glances back at me as they left, confusion and worry written across every face, until the heavy doors closed behind them with a sound like a held breath finally released. And then it was just me, the Queen, and 12 guards who had almost killed me for saying her eyes were beautiful. The Queen watched the doors close before turning back to face me fully, and for the first time since I had walked into that chamber, I saw something in her expression that looked almost like fear. Not fear of me, fear of what I had said. Fear of what it might mean. "Walk with me," she said, and turned toward a smaller door set into the side wall, one I had not noticed until now, half hidden behind a curtain of the same living blue material that lined the chamber walls. I looked back once, toward the closed doors where my delegation had disappeared, then followed the Queen of 6 star systems through a passage no human had ever walked before, my heart still hammering from words I never meant to say out loud, words that had somehow shaken an empire without a single act of violence behind them at all. The passage behind the throne room was narrow enough that the Queen had to lower her head slightly to pass through, and I found myself half jogging to keep pace with her long strides, my pulse still hammering from what had just happened. 2 guards followed a short distance behind us, close enough to reach me in an instant if they needed to, and I did not miss the way their weapons stayed unsheathed the entire time. We walked in silence until we reached a smaller chamber, circular in shape, with a domed ceiling that let in soft, natural light from somewhere above. Unlike the throne room, this space felt almost plain. A low table sat in the center, surrounded by cushions built for a body far larger than mine. The Queen lowered herself onto one side of it, gesturing for me to sit on the other. I sat, my legs still shaking slightly, and tried to remember how to breathe normally. "You are frightened," she said. It was not a question. "Yes," I admitted. "A little." "You should be," she said, though not unkindly. 20 minutes ago my guard nearly ended your life over 5 words. That fear is reasonable." I did not know what to say to that, so I said nothing, watching her across the low table as she studied me with those same shifting silver eyes that had started all of this in the first place. Up close, without the panic of the throne room clouding my thoughts, I noticed things I had missed before. Fine lines etched into the plating around her eyes, the kind that might come with age even on a species built so differently from my own. A faint weariness in the way she held her shoulders, as though she had been carrying something heavy for so long that she no longer noticed the weight, only the ache it left behind. "I need you to understand something," she said, and for the first time her voice lost its formal edge, softening into something closer to exhaustion. "Among my people, we do not speak of physical beauty carelessly. We do not compliment a face, or eyes, or the shape of someone standing before us, not the way I understand your people do." I frowned. "Why not?" "Because such words are reserved," she said, "for the dying." The room seemed to grow quieter around me, though nothing had actually changed. When one of my people is near the end of their life, she continued, family gathers to speak what we call the parting words. It is the final honesty allowed between two living things, the moment when pretense falls away and truth is spoken plainly, including truths about how a person appears, how their eyes look in the light, how their face has aged with grace or hardship. It is considered the deepest form of love we have, because it can only be given once, and only at the end. I felt something cold settle in my chest as the pieces started fitting together. So when I said your eyes were stunning, I said slowly, your guards thought I was ending my life, she finished. Or worse, that I was already dying and no one had told them. Some believed you carried knowledge of a threat against me. Others believed you had somehow seen something none of us could see, an illness, a weakness, a mark of death written across my body that only an outsider's eyes could read. I felt sick. I had nearly caused a riot with a compliment that, back home, would have been forgotten within the hour. I am so sorry, I said. I had no idea. I would never have said anything if I had known. The Queen was quiet for a long moment, her gaze drifting down to the table between us, one clawed finger tracing an idle pattern against its surface. Do not apologize, she said finally. Not for that. I looked up, confused. You misunderstand my reaction, she continued. My guard reacted with fear. I did not. I did not know what to do with that. I waited, letting the silence stretch until she was ready to fill it, some instinct telling me that pushing her to speak faster would only close the door she seemed to be slowly opening. I have ruled for 300 years, she said eventually. In that time, I have been feared, obeyed, studied, and worshipped by more beings than you could count. Advisors bow to me, soldiers die for me. Scholars write about the pattern of my plating and the color of my eyes as though they were studying stars, cataloging me the way one might catalog a weapon or a monument. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice had dropped low enough that I had to lean forward slightly to catch it clearly. No one has ever simply looked at me and told me I was beautiful, not as a farewell, not as an ending, simply as a truth, spoken because it was true, with nothing owed and nothing expected in return. I sat with that for a moment, feeling the full weight of what she was telling me settle over the room. Where I come from, I said carefully, that is just something you say. It does not mean anything is ending. It does not mean anyone is dying. It just means someone noticed something good and wanted to say it out loud. The Queen's eyes shone again, that same wet brightness from the throne room returning, though this time she did not fight it as hard. Say it again, she said quietly. Not as a test. I wish to hear it without the fear in the room this time. I hesitated, glancing toward the two guards still standing near the entrance, their expressions unreadable behind the dark plating of their helmets. The Queen followed my gaze and made a small gesture, and after a moment's hesitation, both guards stepped outside, leaving the door open but giving us at least the illusion of privacy. Your eyes are beautiful, I said again, simpler this time, without the comparison to home, just the plain truth of it. They remind me that something wonderful can exist in a place I never expected to find it. The Queen closed her eyes, and for a moment I thought I had made another terrible mistake, said something wrong all over again. But when she opened them, a single thin line of moisture had escaped down the side of her face, catching the soft light of the domed ceiling above us. She did not wipe it away. She let it fall, watching me the entire time, as though daring me to look away first. I did not look away. Thank you, she said, her voice rough in a way that had nothing to do with translation error and everything to do with genuine emotion breaking through 300 years of careful control. I do not remember the last time someone spoke to me and expected nothing in return. I did not know what to say, so I said the only honest thing I had. I did not expect anything. I still do not. That, she said, is exactly why it mattered. We sat in silence after that, neither of us in a hurry to fill the space with more words, until the door opened again and one of the guards stepped back inside, murmuring something urgent to the queen in their own language. Her posture shifted instantly, the softness from a moment ago folding itself away beneath armor built from centuries of practice. "Your delegation grows anxious," she said, rising smoothly from her cushion. "Word has already spread through my court about what happened in the throne room. There will be questions. There will be suspicion. My advisor Draith Sylamar in particular will want answers, and he will not be gentle in seeking them." I stood as well, my legs finally steady beneath me again. "What do I tell them?" I asked. "My people, I mean. What do I say happened here?" The queen considered this for a moment. "Tell them the truth," she said, "that you complimented my eyes, that my guard reacted to a misunderstanding of custom, and that the matter has been resolved peacefully. Nothing more." I nodded, though something in her tone told me the matter was far from resolved. Not really, not in the way she was implying. "There is one more thing," she said, as we walked back toward the passage that would return me to my delegation. "I would like to speak with you again, not as queen to visitor, simply as two beings curious about each other's world." I blinked, surprised by the directness of the request. "I would like that," I said honestly. "Good," she said, and for just a moment, something almost like a smile crossed her sharp features, an expression so unfamiliar on her face that it looked almost foreign there, like a language she had not spoken in a very long time and was only now remembering the shape of. We reached the main chamber, where Laura and the rest of the delegation waited with barely contained anxiety, peppering me with questions the moment I stepped through the doors. I answered as calmly as I could, repeating the simple version the queen had given me, watching relief slowly replace the fear on their faces. But as we were led back toward our quarters for the night, I caught sight of a figure standing near the edge of the chamber, half hidden in shadow. Tall, thin, wrapped in the same gray robes the advisor had worn earlier, watching me with an expression that held none of the queen's warmth and all of her guard's suspicion. Draith Sylamar did not say a word as I passed. He did not need to. The look on his face said everything I needed to know. Whatever had just begun between me and the Queen of Six-Star Systems, not everyone in her court was going to let it happen quietly. A blade came within inches of my throat on the 9th night I visited the Queen's private chamber, and the only reason I am still alive to tell you about it is that Kest Valor, captain of the Immortal Guard, moved faster than the blade did. I had not expected the visits to become a pattern. After that first conversation, I assumed it might happen once more, maybe twice, before the Queen's advisors found a way to end it. Instead, over the following weeks, a message would arrive almost every other evening, delivered quietly by a guard who never spoke, summoning me to the domed chamber behind the throne room. I went every time. I never once considered refusing. Laura Whitfield was not pleased about it, though she stopped fighting me on it after the 3rd visit, once it became clear that whatever was happening between me and the Queen was helping our entire delegation more than any formal negotiation session had managed in months. Trade discussions that had stalled for weeks suddenly found new momentum. Doors that had been closed to human diplomats for over a year began opening, one at a time, each one traced back to a quiet word from the Queen to one of her ministers. Nobody outside a small circle knew why. I was not exactly hiding my visits, but I was not advertising them either. As far as most of the Vorthali court understood, I was simply a curiosity the Queen had taken an interest in, a strange, soft-skinned outsider she liked to question about human customs. That was true, as far as it went. It was also nowhere close to the whole truth. We talked about everything during those visits. I told her about the aurora back home, about the winter nights my sister and I used to spend wrapped in blankets on our back porch, watching colors ripple across the sky like something alive. She told me about her own childhood, centuries ago, growing up in the shadow of a mother who had also worn the crown, learning from an early age that a queen's face was meant to be a mask and nothing more. "I have not shown my true face to anyone in longer than your species has existed as a civilization," she told me one night, and I could not tell if the words were meant to impress me or simply to be honest, though with her, I was starting to learn those two things were rarely far apart. I asked her once why she had never told anyone, in 3 centuries, how tired that mask made her. She looked at me for a long moment before answering. "Because a queen who admits to weariness is a queen who invites challenge," she said. "My court respects strength. They fear weakness. I have spent 300 years making certain they never see the difference between the two in me. I am not fear. When I sit with you," she added quietly, "I am simply tired. There is a difference, and you are the only one who has ever let me feel it." I did not know how to respond to things like that, so mostly I just listened, and I think that alone was worth more to her than anything I could have said in reply. But not everyone in the palace shared my patience for these visits, and Draith Silamar in particular grew more open in his disapproval with each passing week. I began noticing him more often, always at a distance, always watching. He never approached me directly. He did not need to. His presence alone carried a message clear enough that even a human unfamiliar with Vorthali customs could read it without effort. I learned more about him from Kest Valor, the only guard who had ever spoken more than a few words to me directly. Kest was different from the others, less rigid in his formality, though no less dangerous. He had served the queen for over a century, had fought in 3 border wars in her name, and carried a scar across one side of his jaw that he never explained and I never asked about. "Draith believes you are a threat to the throne," Kest told me one evening as he escorted me back through the palace corridors after another visit with the queen. "He believes the old prophecy has found its shape in you." "What prophecy?" I asked. Kest was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "There is an old text, kept by the temple scholars, that speaks of an outsider who will come from beyond the stars and speak a blessing to the throne that no Vorthali dares speak. The texts say this blessing will mark the end of the current reign, one way or another. Some believe it means the death of the ruler. Others believe it simply means the end of the old ways, a change in how the throne itself is understood." I felt my stomach twist. "And Draith believes I am that outsider." "Draith believes many things that serve his own ambitions," Kest said, his tone carrying something close to contempt. "He has wanted the throne reorganized under a council for years, one where his voice carries far more weight than a single monarch's ever could. The prophecy gives him a convenient reason to argue that change is not just wise, but foretold." I thought about that for the rest of the night, turning it over in my mind long after I returned to the human quarters, staring at the ceiling instead of sleeping. I had come to this planet as the lowest-ranking member of a diplomatic team, meant to be invisible, meant to matter to no one. Now an ancient prophecy had apparently found a shape in me, and a powerful advisor wanted me removed before that shape could finish forming. I told the queen about the conversation the next time I saw her, expecting her to dismiss it as court gossip. Instead, her expression grew serious in a way I had not seen before. "Draith is not a fool," she said. "Dangerous, ambitious, but not a fool. If he has decided to use the prophecy against you, he will not stop at words." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means you should be careful," she said. "And it means I may need to be more careful as well, for both our sakes." 3 nights later, the blade came. I was walking the outer corridor that connected the human quarters to the main palace wing, a route I had walked dozens of times without incident, when a figure stepped from the shadow of a side passage, moving fast and silent. I did not even have time to react before I felt the rush of air near my throat, close enough that I felt the edge of something cold brush against my skin. Then Kest was there, appearing from nowhere, his own blade catching the attacker's weapon with a sound like struck metal, the force of the block sending both combatants staggering apart. I stumbled back against the corridor wall, my heart slamming against my ribs, watching as Kest and the hooded attacker exchanged a series of fast, brutal strikes that ended almost as quickly as they began. Kest driving the attacker back with a final blow that sent them fleeing into the darkness of a side passage before I could even see their face clearly. Kest did not chase them. Instead, he turned immediately to me, checking me over with quick, efficient movements, his own breathing barely elevated despite what had just happened. "You are unharmed," he said. It was not quite a question. "I think so," I managed, my voice shakier than I wanted it to be. Kest's jaw tightened, the scar along it shifting with the motion. "This was not a random attack," he said. "Someone knew your route. Someone knew your schedule. This was planned." "GuardHFY," I said. "I cannot prove that," Kest said carefully, though his tone made clear what he believed regardless of proof. "But I will inform the Queen immediately. From this point forward, you do not walk these corridors alone." The Queen's reaction, when Kest brought me before her that same night, was unlike anything I had seen from her before. Gone was the careful composure, the measured stillness I had come to associate with her public presence. Her hands trembled with something far sharper than the emotion I had seen the very first day we met, and when she spoke, her voice carried an edge of fury I had not known she possessed. "Who did this?" she demanded, though the question was aimed more at the room itself than at me or Kest specifically. "We have no proof," Kest said, "only suspicion." "Then we will find proof," she said, rising from her seat, with a speed that made the guards near the door straighten instinctively. She turned to me, and for a moment the fury in her expression softened into something closer to fear, the same fear I had glimpsed the very first day, though this time it was clearly fear for me rather than confusion at what I had said. "I should never have allowed you to walk these halls without protection," she said. "This is my failure, not yours." "It is not your fault," I said, though my voice still shook slightly from the adrenaline that had not fully left my system. "Nobody could have predicted this." "I could have," she said quietly. "I knew GuardHFY's ambitions. I knew the danger the prophecy posed to anyone associated with me. I let myself believe our visits were harmless because I wanted them to continue, because I did not want to give up the only honest conversations I have had in 3 centuries. That selfishness nearly cost you your life tonight." I stepped closer to her, ignoring the way Kest tensed at the movement. "I am not sorry," I said. "Not about any of it. If this is the cost of those conversations, I would still choose them again." The Queen looked at me for a long moment, something complicated moving behind her silver eyes, before she finally spoke again, her voice quieter now, steadier. "Then we will simply have to make certain the cost does not rise any higher," she said. "Kest, double the guard on his quarters. I want eyes on every corridor he walks, day and night, until this matter is resolved." Kest bowed and left to carry out the order, leaving me alone with the Queen for the first time since the attack. She studied me for a long moment, her expression unreadable, before speaking again. "There is something else you should know," she said, "something I have delayed telling you because I did not wish to frighten you further, but after tonight I no longer have the luxury of delay." I waited, bracing myself. "The prophecy GuardHFY has seized upon carries a second part," she said. "One the temple scholars rarely speak of, because its meaning has always been unclear. It says that when the outsider's blessing is spoken and the old order begins to shift, a challenge will rise from within the throne itself, testing whether the change is worthy or whether it will break the empire apart entirely." I felt a chill settle over me. "A challenge," I repeated. "What kind of challenge?" "I do not know," she admitted. "No ruler in recorded history has lived through the events the prophecy describes, at least not in a way the scholars agree on. But GuardHFY knows the text as well as I do, perhaps better. If he intends to use it against me, he will not simply rely on hired blades in dark corridors. He will find a way to make the challenge formal, public, impossible to ignore." "What happens if he wins that challenge?" I asked. The Queen's expression darkened. "Then everything changes," she said. "The throne, the succession, perhaps even what remains of the old traditions that have held my people together for longer than either of us can properly imagine. GuardHFY does not simply want power for its own sake. He believes the old ways are broken, that a council of ambitious minds like his own would serve the empire better than a single monarch bound by customs he considers outdated and sentimental." "Do you believe that?" I asked quietly. She was silent for a long moment, staring past me toward some point I could not see. I believe some of our customs have kept me isolated for centuries longer than was ever necessary, she said finally. I believe you have shown me that much simply by being willing to speak an honest word to me, without fear of what it might cost you. But I do not believe Drayeth's version of change would make my people freer. I believe it would simply replace one kind of cage with another, dressed up in language about progress and reform. We stood together in silence after that, the weight of everything she had told me settling heavily over the room. I thought about the blade that had nearly found my throat only hours earlier, about the ancient prophecy that had apparently decided to right itself around a junior diplomatic aide who had only ever wanted to disappear into the background of a mission far bigger than himself. I did not disappear into the background anymore. Whatever happened next, that possibility was gone for good. Whatever comes, the Queen said quietly, breaking the silence at last, know that I do not regret a single word you have spoken to me, nor a single evening we have spent in this room. Whatever Drayeth intends, he cannot take that from either of us. I believed her when she said it. I did not yet know how badly that belief was about to be tested. The doors of the throne room burst open before the morning session had even properly begun, and Drayeth Silamar walked in flanked by 6 armed supporters, his voice already raised loud enough to silence the entire chamber before anyone could stop him. I was standing near the back with the rest of the human delegation, there to observe a routine trade discussion that had nothing to do with prophecies or challenges or blades in dark corridors. At least, that was what I believed when I walked in that morning. Drayeth had other plans. I invoke the right of challenge, he announced, his voice carrying easily across the massive chamber, echoing off the high ceiling and the pulsing blue walls. By the old law, recorded in the temple texts and honored by every monarch before this one, I challenge the legitimacy of Queen Ashenar's continued rule. The room erupted into chaos. Advisors shouted over one another. Guards along the walls shifted uneasily, unsure whether to move against Drayeth's supporters or hold their positions, caught between conflicting loyalties that none of them had ever expected to face in their lifetimes. The Queen rose from her throne, her expression carved from stone, though I could see the tension in her shoulders from where I stood. On what grounds? She demanded, her voice cutting through the noise with practiced authority. On the grounds of the outsider's blessing, Drayeth said, turning slightly to point directly at me, his long finger singling me out in front of the entire court. This human spoke words to you that our own law reserves for the dying. The temple texts are clear. When such words are spoken to a living monarch, it marks the beginning of the end of their reign, whether by death or by necessary change. I ask the court to recognize what has already occurred, whether the Queen wishes to admit it or not. Every eye in the chamber turned toward me. My chest felt tight, my legs frozen in place, the weight of hundreds of stairs pressing down on me harder than anything I had felt since that first moment in the throne room weeks earlier. Laura grabbed my arm, whispering something urgent about staying quiet, letting the Queen and her advisors handle this through proper channels. I understood the wisdom in that. I also understood that proper channels had never once worked in my favor since the day I arrived on this planet, and I was not about to start trusting them now, not with everything on the line. I stepped forward before I could talk myself out of it. "May I speak?" I said, my voice shaking slightly but carrying clearly enough in the sudden silence that followed. Drayeth's expression flickered with something close to satisfaction, as though I had just walked directly into whatever trap he had laid for me. The Queen's eyes found mine across the chamber, a warning flashing behind them, though she did not order me to stop. "Speak," she said instead, her voice steady despite everything happening around her. I looked around the massive chamber, at the rows of guards, the advisors, the temple scholars who had been summoned to witness whatever judgment the court might render, and I felt smaller than I had ever felt in my life. But I thought about the domed chamber behind the throne room, about the Queen's tears on that first night, about everything she had told me in the weeks since. I thought about the blade that had nearly ended my life, and about her fury when she learned of it, fury born from something far deeper than simple diplomatic concern. I told the truth. It seemed like the only thing left to do. Where I come from, I said, telling someone their eyes are beautiful is not a farewell. It is not a mark of death or a sign that something is ending. It is simply a way of saying that you noticed something good in another person and that you wanted them to know it. I said those words to the Queen because I meant them, nothing more and nothing less. I did not know they carried a different meaning here. I would never have spoken them if I had known they would cause this much harm. HFY's supporters murmured among themselves, and I saw doubt flicker across a few faces in the crowd, though HFY himself remained unmoved, his expression hardening further. "Intent does not change consequence," he said, his voice sharp and confident. The words were spoken. The old law does not ask why they were spoken, only that they were. The prophecy does not care for human ignorance of our customs. It cares only for what has been set in motion. "Then let the court examine the prophecy fully," said a new voice, and I turned to see Kest Valor stepping forward from his position near the throne, something I had never seen a member of the Immortal Guard do during an open court session before. "Guards do not speak in challenges of succession," HFY snapped, clearly caught off guard by the interruption. "Guards may speak when the safety of the Queen has been directly threatened," Kest replied evenly, "and I have witnessed exactly such a threat. 3 nights ago, an armed attacker struck at this human in the outer corridor, an attack that very nearly succeeded. I intervened myself. I have reported this to the Queen already, and I will swear before this entire court that the timing of that attack, so soon after word of the human's visits to the Queen began spreading through the palace, was no coincidence." The chamber fell into a different kind of silence now, tense and uncertain, as HFY's expression shifted from confidence to something colder and more guarded. "Are you accusing me of ordering an assassination?" HFY said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I am stating facts," Kest said. "The court may draw its own conclusions." The Queen stepped down from her throne then, moving to stand beside me, close enough that her presence alone seemed to steady the shaking in my legs. When she spoke, her voice carried across the chamber with a force that silenced even the last murmurs of conversation. "Grath speaks of an old law," she said. "Let us then speak fully of that law, rather than the convenient half of it he has chosen to share with this court." She turned to address the assembled temple scholars directly. "Elder Vesic," she said, addressing an ancient-looking figure near the front of the gathered crowd, "you know the full text of the prophecy better than anyone alive. Tell this court what the second passage says, the passage concerning the nature of the challenge itself." The elder scholar stepped forward slowly, his voice thin but carrying clearly in the silent chamber. "The second passage states that the challenge, once risen, must be tested not merely by claim, but by truth," he said. "It states that the one who brings the challenge must prove their cause serves the whole of the empire, not merely their own ambition, and that the court itself must judge whether the challenger acts from genuine concern for the realm or from a desire for power dressed in the language of prophecy." Every eye in the room turned back toward HFY, whose composure had begun to crack visibly under the weight of the elder's words. "I ask this court then," the Queen said, her voice ringing with a clarity and strength I had not heard from her even in our most private conversations, "to judge HFY Silamar's cause honestly. Has he acted from concern for the empire, or has he used an old prophecy and an innocent misunderstanding as convenient cover for an ambition he has held for years, an ambition to dissolve the throne entirely and rule instead through a council where his own voice carries the loudest weight?" HFY opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, one of his own supporters, a younger advisor who had remained silent until this moment, stepped back from his side, putting visible distance between himself and HFY in front of the entire court. A second supporter followed a moment later, then a third, until HFY stood increasingly alone amid the very group he had brought to display strength. "This was never about the prophecy, was it?" the young advisor said quietly, though his voice carried in the silent chamber. "You told us the human posed a genuine danger to the throne. You did not tell us of an attack in the corridors. You did not tell us this challenge would be built on the near death of an innocent visitor. Drayeth's composure finally shattered. The throne has grown weak, he snapped, his voice rising with a desperation that had not been there moments earlier. 300 years of the same ruler, the same customs, the same isolation that keeps our queen locked away from her own people behind masks and traditions older than reason itself. I sought to force change because no one else in this court had the courage to demand it. You sought power, Kest said flatly. Do not dress ambition in noble words before this court. We have all seen through it now. The queen raised a hand, silencing the growing murmur that had begun spreading through the chamber once more. Drayeth Silamar, she said, her voice heavy with something that sounded almost like sorrow beneath its authority. You have served this court for many years, and there was a time your council served the Empire well. But the Elder's words are clear, and the court has heard the truth of your intentions from your own supporters' mouths before you could hide them further. Your challenge is rejected, not because the prophecy is false, but because your cause was never the one you claimed it to be. Drayeth stood frozen for a long moment, the weight of the court's judgment settling visibly over him, before two guards stepped forward at a small gesture from Kest, flanking him without touching him, waiting for the queen's final word. Escort him from the palace, she said quietly. He will face formal judgment for the attack on the human delegate, once proof has been fully gathered and confirmed. Until then, he is stripped of his position and his voice within this court. Drayeth did not resist as the guards led him from the chamber, though the look he cast back toward me before the doors closed behind him carried a warning I would not soon forget, a promise that this was not truly finished, no matter what the court had just decided. The chamber remained tense and quiet for a long moment after the doors closed, everyone present still processing what had just unfolded in front of them. Then, slowly, the queen turned to face the gathered court fully, and when she spoke again, her voice had shifted into something I had not heard her use in public before, something warmer, more open, less guarded than any formal address I had witnessed during my time in this palace. I owe this court an honesty I have withheld for far too long, she said, and I could see Laura and the rest of my delegation exchange uncertain glances, unsure what was coming next. I turned to the queen, my heart still pounding from everything that had just happened, and found her looking directly at me, that same shine of emotion I had seen on our very first meeting returning to her silver eyes once more, though this time there was no fear in it at all. Every guard in the immortal ranks stood at full attention as the queen turned from me to face them directly, and for a moment I thought she meant to address the danger Drayeth still posed, some final order to secure the palace against whatever retaliation he might attempt after his removal from court. Instead, she said something I do not think a single person in that chamber expected to hear. 300 years ago, she began, her voice steady but carrying a rawness I had never heard from her in public. My mother placed this crown on my head and told me that a queen exists apart from her people, above the ordinary comforts of friendship, connection, and honesty that others are permitted to share freely. She told me that strength required distance, that warmth was a weakness only lesser rulers could afford. I believed her. I built my entire reign around that belief, because it was the only guidance I had ever been given. The chamber remained utterly silent, every guard, advisor, and scholar hanging on her next words. I was wrong, she said simply, or perhaps my mother was wrong, and I simply lacked the courage to question her for 3 centuries. Either way, the result was the same. I have ruled longer than any monarch in the recorded history of our people, and in all that time, not once did anyone in this court look at me and speak an honest word simply because it was true, expecting nothing in return. Her gaze found mine again, and this time she did not look away, even as her voice grew thick with emotion she was no longer trying to hide. Then a young human, who knew nothing of our customs, who broke every rule of protocol within minutes of entering this chamber, looked at me and told me my eyes were beautiful, simply because he believed it to be true. He did not know the weight our traditions placed on such words. He did not intend a blessing, or an omen, or a challenge to my throne. He intended only kindness, freely given, the kind of kindness I did not realize I had been starving for until the moment it was offered. A soft murmur moved through the gathered court, though nobody dared interrupt her. I have spent these past weeks in his company, not because a prophecy demanded it, and not because political advantage required it, though I will admit our conversations opened doors between our two peoples that formal negotiation alone had failed to open in over a year. I spent this time with him because for the first time in 300 years, I felt like a living being rather than a symbol carved from old stone and older expectations. She turned fully to face me now, ignoring the rest of the court entirely, her voice dropping into something quieter, more personal, though it still carried clearly enough for everyone present to hear. "Thank you, Ethan Marsh," she said, and hearing my own name spoken by her in front of the entire Vorthali court sent something warm through my chest that I did not have words for. "Thank you for treating me as though I were still alive, rather than a title to be feared or a monument to be preserved. Whatever comes next between our two peoples, I do not believe I can properly repay what you have given me these past weeks, but I intend to try." I did not know what to say. I had never expected, walking into that chamber weeks ago with nothing more than a data tablet and strict instructions to remain invisible, that I would end up standing at the center of a moment like this, addressed personally by a queen who ruled 6 star systems, thanked in front of her entire court for something as simple as an honest compliment. "I only meant to say something true," I finally managed, my voice unsteady but sincere. "I did not know it would matter this much. I am glad it did." The queen's expression softened into something I had never seen cross her sharp features before, an open, unguarded warmth that seemed to catch even her own guards off balance, several of them exchanging glances as though witnessing something entirely new about the ruler they had served for so long. Kest Valor stepped forward then, and to my surprise, he was the one who broke the silence that followed, his voice carrying a note of dry humor I had not expected from him. "It seems," he said, addressing the gathered court generally, "that we have found our answer to the second passage of the prophecy after all. The challenge has been tested, and the truth has proven stronger than ambition dressed as tradition. Perhaps the old texts were wiser than even Elder Vesic gave them credit for." A ripple of quiet laughter moved through parts of the court, easing some of the tension that had built through the morning's events, and I saw Laura Whitfield finally relax beside me, some of the color returning to her face for the first time since Drath had burst through the chamber doors. In the days that followed, everything shifted, though not all at once, and not without effort. Drath's formal judgment took several weeks to complete, the investigation into the attack on me eventually confirming Kest's suspicions beyond any reasonable doubt, though the queen chose exile over harsher punishment, a mercy that surprised many in her court, but did not surprise me, not after everything I had come to understand about who she truly was beneath the crown and the armor. The trade agreements our delegation had struggled to secure for over a year moved forward with a speed nobody had anticipated, doors opening one after another as word spread through Vorthali space that the Queen herself had publicly embraced closer ties with the human envoys. Laura Whitfield, to her credit, never once tried to take credit for what had actually caused the shift, always deferring quietly to what she called, with a small knowing smile, an unconventional diplomatic breakthrough. I stayed on long after the rest of my original delegation rotated home, my role shifting slowly from junior aide carrying tablets nobody needed to something the Vorthali court began referring to, half fondly and half with lingering disbelief, as a cultural liaison, though the guards who had nearly ended my life on my very first day had their own name for me, one that stuck far more firmly than any official title ever could. "The one who speaks to the dying and the living the same," Kest told me one evening, months after that first chaotic morning in the throne room, as we walked together through corridors that no longer felt dangerous, only familiar. "That is what the younger guards call you now, when they think neither of us can hear." I laughed, though there was something warm beneath the humor of it. "I only ever meant to say her eyes were beautiful," I said. "I never expected any of this." Kest's scarred jaw shifted in what I had learned, over these months, was the closest thing to a smile he ever allowed himself in public. "Sometimes the smallest truths carry the heaviest weight," he said. "You did not set out to change an empire, you simply refused to stay silent when something good stood in front of you. Perhaps that is exactly the kind of change our people needed all along." I thought about that conversation again many nights later, standing beside the Queen on a balcony overlooking the palace gardens, watching the twin moons of her homeworld rise slowly over the horizon, their pale light catching in her silver eyes the same way the aurora back home used to catch the winter sky. She turned to me then, and I saw none of the fear or the careful distance that had defined our very first meeting, only the quiet, steady warmth of someone who had finally learned, after 300 years, that being seen and being loved were not weaknesses to guard against, but gifts worth every risk it had taken to receive them. "Your eyes are beautiful too," she said softly, testing the words carefully, the way someone might test a language they were still learning to speak fluently. "Is that how it is done, among your people?" I smiled, feeling something settle warmly in my chest, a rightness I had not expected to find so far from the aurora skies of my childhood home. "That is exactly how it is done," I said, and I meant it, every single word, the same simple, honest way I had meant it the very first time, standing frozen in a throne room surrounded by spears, never once imagining it would lead me here.